In the last video, we considered the idea that morality comes from God. In this video, we'll consider the idea that morality comes from culture. So here's the idea. Morality comes from groups of people who largely share common traditions, convictions, and/or practices. So if you have a group of people who constitute a culture, the kind of norms that they adopt are the morals for that culture. There is no sort of morality that supersedes culture, that goes beyond culture, that cross-cuts culture. Morality is created by culture. So you can think of it like this. Culture is the ultimate source of morality. It's what makes true moral claims true and false moral claims false. Put another way, what makes true moral claims true and false ones false are facts about the traditions, convictions, and/or practices of the groups who are making the claims. Now, traditions, convictions, and practices often differ from one group to another. One group might say, you should wear a hat when you go outside. Another group might not say that. And consequently, this view that morality comes from culture suggests that some moral claims are true when made by members of one group, but will be false when made by members of another group. So if morality really does come from culture, and my culture says it's wrong to wear a hat, it's wrong not to wear a hat when you go outside, and your culture doesn't say that, then if I say it's wrong not to wear a hat when you go outside, what I say is true. But if you say it, what you say is false, because it's not a norm that your culture endorses. Now, because this view says morality comes from culture and cultures can be different, this view relativizes the truth and falsity of moral claims to groups. When we say relativizes, we just mean a moral claim can only be evaluated relative to a group. Now, that might sound like a really weird idea, but the basic idea is pretty simple. So any sentence with the word I in it, like I went to the store yesterday, or I am 75 inches tall, has to be relativized to a speaker. To see that, just notice the following. If I say, I am Stephen Biggs, that's true. If you say, I am Stephen Biggs, that's false. So the single sentence, I am Stephen Biggs, when in my mouth comes out true, when in your mouth comes out false. So the truth of that statement is relative to the speaker. It depends on who's saying it, whether it's true or false. And the idea here is that all moral claims are like that. The truth or falsity of the claim depends on who's speaking. Now, there's different kinds of moral relativism. You could have a radically individualistic moral relativism that says whatever norms, whatever sort of moral guidelines you adopt are correct for you. And on that radical moral relativism, you have to relativize the truth or falsity of each moral statement to each speaker. The view we're looking at is a different version of relativism. It says you have to relativize the truth or falsity of each moral statement to the culture of the speaker. Now, I want you to be clear about what this view and what this view isn't, and we're going to use an example to make that clear. So let's take the claim that torturing others is always wrong. So I'll abbreviate this as TAW on the slide. So this just stands for torturing others is always wrong. Now, suppose members of G1, some group G1, condemn all torture. Well, it follows that torturing others is always wrong is true relative to that group. And if another group approves of some torture, maybe they say torture is okay if it's going to save lives, then torturing others is always wrong is false relative to that group. Consequently, if a member of that first group over here says some act of torture is morally permissible, maybe because it will save lives down the line, she's wrong, because her culture says torturing others is never morally permissible. Whereas if someone over here says torturing someone in a particular case is morally permissible, she might be right. Suppose the group says torturing others is morally permissible when it will save lives down the line. Then this person who says torturing others is morally permissible, torturing someone in this case is morally permissible because it will save lives down the line, is right. So let's look at a particular instance of torture. So this person is torturing this person, maybe to get some information. By the way, I should let you know that experiments on subjects demonstrate pretty clearly that torturing is not a good way to extract information. What torturing someone does is primarily get the person to try and say whatever she thinks she needs to say in order to get the torturing to stop. And that may be something that's true, it may be something that's false. So suppose this person here doesn't really know what this person is asking, but this person believes this person knows. Well, the person being tortured is likely in that scenario to just make up something to satisfy this person in order to get the torturing to stop. That's what experiments overwhelmingly demonstrate. So I'm not endorsing the view, the false empirical claim, the false claim about the facts that torturing others actually gives you useful information. I'm just saying, like, suppose that somebody believes that it does, they might say it's okay to torture people when it will give you useful information that will save lives. Okay, so back to the main point here. We have a group member of each group. The member of group 1 comes along and says, because it will save lives, this torturing is not immoral. And the member of group 2 comes along and thinks the same exact thought. So they're both thinking the same thought, it seems. But now notice, because the member of G1 is from a group that says torturing others is always wrong, that means torturing others is wrong is true, always wrong is true relative to this group. So this statement here that says this torturing isn't wrong must be false, because this member of G1 is saying this torturing isn't immoral, but G1 says torturing is always immoral, and the truth or falsity of this person's thoughts are going to be relative to her group. Now this person over here, who seems to have the same exact thought, because it'll save lives, this torturing isn't immoral, the thought comes out true, because relative to her group, it is true. That is, it is true, let's say, that we've stipulated that it's true that some acts of torture are okay, and let's say this is one of them, okay? So it looks like the same exact thought is false on this side and true on this side. Well, that's not good, because contradictions can't be true. So what's going on? Well, according to the moral relativist, a thought like, because it'll save lives, this torturing isn't immoral, is always shorthand for a thought along the following lines. Because it'll save lives, this torturing isn't immoral, according to my group. There's always this according to my group. You always have to relativize to your group when making a moral claim, because moral claims are only evaluable in relation to your group. There is no such thing as a true moral claim that isn't relativized to a group, or a false moral claim that isn't relativized to a group. Moral claims can only be true or false when relativized to a group. So this thought over here, because it'll save lives, this torturing isn't immoral, doesn't actually make any sense until you add on according to some group or other, and in this case, according to the speaker's group. Now on the other side, because it'll save lives, this torturing isn't immoral, gets relativized differently. It gets relativized to this person's group, and that's a different group. So now when we have the real statements, what's false over here is, because it'll save lives, this torturing isn't immoral according to G1, and that's false because G1 says torturing is always immoral. And what's true over here is, because it will save lives, this torturing isn't immoral according to G2. And that's true because G2 allows that some torturing is moral, and we're just saying this is one of those cases. So we can see that this thought here and this thought here don't actually contradict one another, because really they're two different thoughts. One is relativized to group 1, one is relativized to group 2. Okay. So similarly, suppose we have this person here judges and says this very act of torture is immoral. And this person over here says this very act of torture is not immoral. It looks like they're contradicting one another, but really they're not, because moral claims don't make any sense until they're relativized to a group. That is, they can't be true or false. They can't be evaluated until they're relativized to a group. And once we relativize this one on the left to a group, we can say what it means is this very act of torture is immoral according to my group. And that's true, because this person's group says torturing is always wrong. And this person over here is actually thinking this very act of torture isn't immoral according to my group, and it's a different group. So this thought can end up being true. Even though it appears like these statements contradict, they don't really, because one is saying relative to my group, the other is saying relative to my group. Now, one way to see this point is notice that this person here, this member of group 1 and this member of group 2, can actually agree about these two statements on the outside. That is, they can both say, yes, according to group 1, this torturing is immoral. And yes, according to group 2, this torturing isn't immoral. They can agree to those claims, so the claims aren't really contradictory. Now, why would someone endorse moral relativism? Here's a pretty simple argument. Some cultures' moral rules contradict the moral rules of other cultures. In those kinds of cases, we don't have any way to decide which culture is correct, which set of rules is the correct set of rules. If some cultures' moral rules contradict other cultures' moral rules, and we don't have any way to decide when there's this kind of contradiction, then either the truth must be relative to the culture, or we can't know moral truth. Therefore, either the truth must be relative to the culture, or we can't know moral truth. Well, we can know some moral truths. We can, the idea goes, know things like killing others for fun or torturing others for fun is morally bad, helping people in need is morally good, and so on. So if we know that either moral relativism is true or moral skepticism is true, but we know moral skepticism isn't true, then we can conclude that relativism is true. So the idea is relativism allows us to avoid the extreme view that we can never know any moral truth, maybe because there aren't any moral truths, despite the fact that there's widespread moral disagreement. That's the basic idea. It's like, look, there's widespread moral disagreement. So somebody might say, so we can't know anything about morality. And the relativist replies and says, no, no, no. The truth is actually relative to culture, and we can know relevant facts about culture, so we can know moral truth. Okay, that's the argument for cultural relativism. We'll start next time by looking at an argument against it.